Alright, in this video I'm going to show the new vehicles that I've added to the game. And first we're going to have a look at the models and I'll describe what you're seeing here. So the first thing you're seeing is the actual collision mesh for the train. So again, it's a convex collision brush just like the other videos before. But the only difference is I've added a little wedge to help the player when he collides. He can slide a little bit easier past the train. So I'll move the collision mesh away, and here you can see the actual train. And as you can see, based on the geometry, you can see why I use simplified collision mesh. It just makes the calculations a lot easier and faster when you have less triangles to deal with. And again, it's a closed mesh. And I'll talk about the shadow also here. What I'm using is I call that a drop shadow or a blob shadow. So it's just a texture that I place below the train, and it's very simple and really quick to render, so it's very good for mobile devices. And what I do is I take this texture and I blend it with the final scene, and I use modulative or multiplicative blending. So that's why you see the white around the shadow. White is, in the RGB channels, it would be the full channel. So if we were to go from 0 to 1, 1 would be white. So the RGBs for this area would be 1, 1, 1. And so when I multiply that with the floor, for example, anything where it's white, it'll just show the full floor, because 1 times the final color of the floor is just going to be the color of the floor. And here where it's darker, say it's 0.5 for the RGB, then that'll darken the floor by 0.5, so it'll be half as light or darker by 0.5, and then it'll look shadowed. I'll show this in the editor so that you can have a look, but for now this is the cargo train. And again, I chop off triangles where I can get away with it. So there you can see. So I'll move on to the next vehicle, and again, same as before, really simple collision mesh. So I'll get that out of the way. And this is the locomotive. You can see the mesh. And here's something I'll talk about. I split the train in half like this here because I use a curved shader to give just to give a cartoony look to the world, so objects that are farther away will be curved. And so this will help. It helps me to have this little chop here so that I can get a nicer curve when I bend the train. At least that's the plan. So that's why you see that in most of my train vehicles. So again, very similar collision box. And this is the passenger train. Select it so you can have a look at the mesh. Again, you can see it being split in half. And the final, again, simple collision. And this is a minecart sort of little object that floats around. It's much smaller than the other trains. So next I'll just show all these trains in the editor with a level editor with a level that I banged out in 5 minutes. So here you can see the sample level that I've just come up with. And again, we can look at the shadow and what I was talking about if I zoom in. So anywhere where it was white, like I said, you get the full floor, and wherever it's dark, it just darkens the floor texture, and that'll give you the fake effect of having a shadow. Of course, it's not perfect. For instance, the rails aren't shadowed, but it's good enough for the technique that I want. And it's also really cheap and really fast to render, which is great on mobile. And as you can see here, you can see it highlighted. So there's the shadow texture, and I just splat that and just do a scene blending with the floor to get it to shadow. And oh, I forgot to mention there's different colors. So there's also violet for the train vehicles, and I think, yeah, there's also green for the minecart. If I show one, yeah, here you can see all. So you've got different color choices to get in the world, just to add some variety. So essentially, I've banged this level out really quickly, it's not tuned, and in some places you actually get stuck. There's no way you can get through. But it's good enough for me for doing a stress test. This will really stress the collision detection, since there's tons of objects for me to interact with the player, and also the rendering engine, because each one of these is a draw call. So that's also something good to test. Eventually I'll have this optimized where I'll reduce the number of draw calls, but for now it's something really quick and dirty, and then you'll just be going through the world. And again, it's good to have this type of level, because it'll just help me find whatever bugs are in the system, and if there's any playability issues. So I guess we can call this the very first test level to make sure the gameplay is okay. So I'll just go through a little bit. So again, another thing is I tested the editor just to make sure I have everything I need to place everything properly. And it'll be a combination for the level of both artist place assets like this, but also randomly generated content. So it'll be both instances. Sometimes there won't be anything in the level and it's all generated randomly, and other times I'll just place things with the artists. And as you can see the back, anything that I can get away with not having to send to the GPU, I try to do. So for the next part of the video, I'll just show this level running on the mobile device. Alright, here I'm showing the test level with the level that I showed in the editor in the first part of the video. And you may be wondering, why is the floor white? And two reasons. I forgot to set the texture back, and the second, well, at least I can show you one of the tricks of the trade. Whenever you want to check to make sure that the animations are okay or that there's no weird anomalies, sometimes it's good to test under just a really flat white background, because if there's any issues, they'll really show up in the white background. And sometimes mistakes will go by unnoticed if you have, you know, some sort of floor or something that it easily hides any flaws. So it's easier for me to detect things when I'm testing the level if I have a white background. I don't know if anyone else uses this, but I found it useful. And as I said, this was a test level, and there's places where if you get caught, there's no escape. So that's one of the cases. So I'll just restart it, and then we'll just play through the level. Alright, here's the level with the floor turned back on. And this was that test level, so I'll try to get through it without colliding, which is probably not going to be easy. But the good thing with this level is the collision system is up to snuff, so it can handle everything I throw at it, and so is the rendering. So it didn't slow down at all, and that was a good thing. So the triangle counts that I picked are correct, and the engine can handle whatever I throw at it. And I also didn't expect that you'd be able to jump on the mine carts and get up on the trains, but that's a good thing. And another thing I like is that I'm mixing a lot of styles. Like there's some Victorian steampunk sort of thing going on. There's medieval elements, some sci-fi, and it all seems to work together. At least I like it. So that was another issue that I was kind of concerned about, but it's not that big of a problem. And so everything seems to work. Oh, I only had a few bugs to fix, but again, that's why you test with a test level like this, just to make sure everything's up and running. And so it is. One other issue I encountered was with MIP mapping. For some reason, the trains did not look good when they were MIP mapped, and the obstacles did. And so I turned off MIP mapping, but then the obstacles didn't look good, and the trains did. And finally I realized, oh, I've got a unused feature where I can selectively pick what objects are mip mapped. So in this case, none of the trains are mip mapped, and the obstacles and the rest of the world are. The character isn't mip mapped, and neither are the shadows. So you can just selectively pick what you want to do and what looks good. I played a lot of other games, and to my shock, they were most of them aren't mip mapped. I wasn't expecting that. So at least mine, I selectively pick what I want. And mip mapping is it's a way where you take the full size texture. For example, this violet train, and in the engine it gets reduced by a power of 2. So then in hardware, it selects which one of those textures in the chain it's going to use. And that the reason you do that is when objects are farther away, it'll reduce aliasing. You can look it up for the full explanation, but it'll reduce the sparkly effect when the hardware is sampling the texture to render on the screen at far distances. However, it sometimes doesn't look good. So for certain things, I've disabled it in the engine. So for now, that's all I have to show with the vehicles. And yeah, I'll do another video when I have something else to show. But for now, it's vehicles. Thanks and bye.